Boom.
And go. I thank you all for joining us. I'm sure, well, they call me Shortcut Sherry, but my real name is Sherry Oswald, and today we're doing Automate Your Processes with Custom SharePoint Lists and PowerApps. PowerApps is, it's not new anymore, but I think there's a lot of missing capability that they may not even know that there's an interaction between SharePoint Lists and PowerApps, because PowerApps creates its own database when you create an app, and SharePoint Lists can be that database, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility with how you consume and share that information and collect information from people. So this is probably one of my favorite sessions. I did it in Denver, and Jeff Wellinger's like, this one needs to be your go-to, Sherry. This needs to be your go-to. I'm like, okay, I like doing this one. It's fun. So thanks for picking it. All right, so who am I? If you want to just jot this down, I'm Sherry Oswald. I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer and a Microsoft Office Specialist Master, which means I've just taken a bunch of tests. I know some stuff, but if you go visit me at my blog, you'll see that I'm a little snarky. I'd like to have fun. I don't really like to be that dry trainer, and I actually hate the word trainer. I'm a learning expert, and my goal when I work with people is to help them to be more productive with the tools that they have at their disposal and may or may not know about them, and make them love them. So, if you've rolled out Office 365 and you feel like people aren't using it, then that's something I can help you with. But years ago, somebody dubbed me Shortcut Sherry, and it stuck. I have the Twitter, I have the Facebook, I have the blog, I have the email, so feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I'm also a customer immersion experience facilitator and a bootcamp trainer for that. If you're familiar with those events, that's something that I specialize in, and I also train people to succeed at those as well. So feel free to reach out, and the hardest thing to remember is how to spell my name, S-H-A-R-I, because even my grandpa misspelled my name most of my life, so that's the hardest part. I answer to any spelling, but the internet isn't quite as forgiving, so. All right, so I'm also a LinkedIn Learning instructor, and if you would like to write down that URL, it gives you a 30-day free trial of LinkedIn Learning. And with the new announcement of Viva, there are going to be quite a few free courses that are going to be released by LinkedIn Learning that you can take if you're interested in leveraging that, not just only for yourself, but for other people in your organization. Feel free to write that down, and then keep an eye out for those announcements. And I'm assuming they're going to come out next week at Ignite. If you're not familiar, Microsoft Ignite is next week, the 2nd through the 4th. It's ignite.microsoft.com. And register. They have swag. You can have your little, they call it your backpack, and you can store stuff in your backpack, and they have digital swag usually, and the vendors there, but usually the big announcements. So want to make sure you check that out if you have the opportunity. But again, bit.ly, LIL for LinkedIn Learning dash, and it is case sensitive, so you have to write it down that way. Okay, so I don't like slides. I like to do the demo. PowerPoint slides to me have a specific purpose, and when you're working in an environment, it is definitely not what my preferred medium. So I have a demo environment that I have spun up, and let's talk about SharePoint and PowerApps and how they work together. I have a SharePoint site here for sales and marketing, and the sales and marketing site is a collection of information. We were kind of discussing it prior to the recording starting, but SharePoint has been a platform that's been around for 20 years, and I can say that because I used SharePoint before it was even called SharePoint. It was called Microsoft Content Management Server. Sorry, I thought I muted my phone. There we go. And Content Management Server was basically just serving up pages. And they had a specific purpose for an organization to communicate, and then it went to more document management. And SharePoint was kind of known for just being a big document repository, and in my world, mostly a document dump. People would take their hard drive or their S drive, J drive, K drive, whatever drive, and dump it into SharePoint, and thought it would work any better. What they never seem to catch on to, as SharePoint has evolved, the capabilities of SharePoint have evolved as well. And one of those evolutions recently that everybody's all excited about, we find in the Office apps. and that would be Microsoft Lists. So if you would want to, go ahead and raise your hand. Let me know if you have heard of Microsoft Lists. Okay, so lists are just lists of information. So when I see a list of information as a document in a SharePoint library, like kittens die for me. Why isn't that just a list? Lists allow you to collect information, and I'm not talking about robust Excel spreadsheets that have macros and all kinds of, you know, formulas and functions and WYSIWYGs in there. I'm talking about it's literally just a list of information. So something like issues that they might be tracking, or assets like computers or cell phones that an organization might have. And Microsoft Lists in Office 365, they give you some templates to start from, but you can actually create whatever you're looking for. Now, everybody's all excited about Microsoft Lists, but guess what? It's been in SharePoint for 20 years. It's been there for a really long time, and people never leveraged it. So you can create a list from your SharePoint site. So if you don't have Teams enabled, or you're not wanting to leverage Teams for your information, you can actually go to the cog in any SharePoint site, the Tools cog, choose Add an App, and here are a bunch of custom lists that you can create. So if you think about it, we have document libraries which store documents, but there's other templates in here such as announcements or links or contacts. There's 3 of them in here that if you create the app from SharePoint, it actually connects with Outlook. And I ask you to guess, but I'll go ahead and tell you. The contacts, the calendar, and the tasks can be lists that are connected to Outlook. So that might be one reason you would want to create it here, because the calendar that's created in Teams is not a SharePoint connected or an Outlook connected calendar. So you might want to start from the apps here instead. All right, so they're just a list of information like tasks. Now, you can create a custom list if you need to, but if you're creating a list in Microsoft Lists, it does kind of the same thing. So I'm going to start with one just for brevity. I'm going to start from one of the templates that is here, and let's do a travel request. So this, you know, you can tell I'm living vicariously through SharePoint right now, because I'm like, let's do some travel requests. All right, so I'm going to choose travel requests and click the template, and where we request travel, I'll always put a description in. Everybody skips the description. This is where people search and find things. So everything in Office 365 is searchable. We want to make it findable. So where we request travel. And you can pick a color for the icon, and then icons, so whichever one makes sense. And then where do you want to save that? Now you have the ability to create a My List list. So that if this is just for you, it will put it in your one. It's basically stored in your OneDrive. But if you're a part of any of the SharePoint sites, you can put it in those sites as well. So if you want to share it with other people, or if you win the lottery and run away, you want to make sure that those are in a public place where it's not lost if you happen to leave the organization. So I'm going to choose the sales and marketing team. This is the SharePoint site, and site navigation. So I'm going to click create here. And it creates a list with a bunch of content in here. Now I want to talk about the different types of data that can be stored in a list. When you create a list, and some people create them using Excel and import it from an Excel spreadsheet, and that causes some issues, so you want to be able to know in the background what has just occurred. So if I go to the list settings, so now that I'm in the list, I'm going to check out list settings.
Take it away.
And here are all of the columns. In other, if you're in a database person, it's a field. But in SharePoint, we call them columns. These are all the columns that were created by default. So we have a reason for travel, and you can see the data type, which is a multiple line of text, who the requester is, which is a person or group, the destination, which is a location. So this is actually using the new location type field where you can search, and basically it's map or geography. Start and end date, which are date and time. This is a calculated column based on these other two. So we're going to look at the back end of these so you can see how they were created, and we're going to add a couple of new fields as well. The airline right now is a choice. Estimated airfare is how much is a currency. So whenever you're creating anything to do with money, you always want to use the currency field type, because otherwise you have penny rounding errors if you create a calculation on that field. Again, hotel costs, hotel location, and is it approved, yes or no? So that's the checkbox or Boolean field. All right. There are some fields that are created by default that you cannot change. Some of them are the modified and created date. So that was the date it was modified last and the date it was created. It's time stamped. You cannot edit that. You can also, the created by and modified by are stamped by who created the item in the list and at what time. And so you can't change that either. All right, so I'm going to go and look at a couple of these, and so we can kind of pick it apart. In the single line of text, so I'm going to select the title column, and maybe I want to change this to be trip name instead. Something that's a little more user-friendly. Notice that the description is empty, and this is one of the things when you, even if you create things from a template, you want to go in and customize the content that's here, because the settings aren't always the most efficient, and one of them is the description. So the description, everybody skips this. When you fill out a form, the description is what pops up underneath the field or the column. So I use this to prompt people for what you want them to put in that particular field. Ask them the question or give them clarifying information of what it is you're looking for there. So I might ask the question, what is the name of your trip? Trip, not tip. All right, require that this information is completed, yes. And the title field is by default created and added to your list, and you cannot not fill it out. It's something, one of those required fields you have to put in. All right, enforce unique values. What that means is you cannot have that same value anywhere else in the list. And I've seen people try to put this on lists of contacts, and that contact, maybe their last name is Smith. That would be a bad idea, because the likelihood of having more than one person with the same last name is possible. So you would not want to enforce unique values. So unique values might be something like a social security number or a product ID or a serial number from a piece of equipment. That would be a reason you might want to enforce unique values, so that you don't duplicate that same equipment or person within your data. On the text field, the default number of characters is 255. That's the maximum number of characters. Now, if you understand the way databases work, it reserves that much space, and when you search data, it has to search 255 characters to find out the rest of that field is empty. That can slow down the search on your content. So you want to right size any of your columns that are text type fields, because otherwise you're going to end up with a really bloated database that takes really long to search for things. So I always encourage people to right size these. So we're going to give them, let's say, 40 characters. If there's a default value, you would enter it here. So if somebody just kind of helps with data entry, if there are common values, you might add the default column here as well. And then down here at the bottom, we have a custom validation field. And this, you give it a formula that it compares the entry to, and then the nastygram that pops up if they did it wrong. So we'll play with that in the fields for the dates. All right, now depending on what type of data you add, you're going to have different options. So let's look at this multiple lines of text option.
You're starting to make me.
And again, they put a lovely description in this one. Thank you for doing that. Require yes or no. This is the purpose of the trip, so it may or may not be something that they require to be filled out. And the number of lines for editing. That doesn't mean that's the maximum number. What that means on the screen that they're filling it out in, it will show 6 lines of text before the scroll bar appears. And then you can add additional text after that. I believe the limit for this is still 65,534 characters, but I might be wrong. But you can check on that. So you have plain text, which means they can't format it, rich text field, which is bold, italics, and text alignments and hyperlinks. And then in here, you can actually insert pictures and tables into that field if you needed to. Now, if you're going to use this with PowerApps, you want to be careful which type you choose here, because sometimes it causes issues with the compatibility with the data types in PowerApps. There's some scripting that you might have to add to your PowerApp so that it displays this content and captures this content correctly. All right. And then this append text changes to existing text. Usually when you change the value in a field, it will just overwrite what was there. If you turn this on and select yes instead, it accumulatively adds to that field so that you have the history of what happened there. And honestly, I've never found a really good reason for that, except for maybe in a change log. But I do a new entry for each item in a change log, so don't worry about that. All right, so we fixed that one. Let's look at the destination field, which is a location. All right, so this one, there aren't any options. Required, yes or no, that's about it, because it's mapping and using geography, so there aren't a whole lot of settings that you can change. So again, each type of data has different types of customizations. Let's look at a date field. So again, we can't change the modified or created date, but we can change these travel start dates and end dates.
Stop.
And a date, you get to choose the date and time, of course, the description here, so date when the travel starts, and again, required, enforce unique values. Here's where it starts getting a little bit different for dates. Do you want the date only, or do you want a date and time? And how do you want to display that? So if you've heard this term, standard or friendly, I could put in tomorrow, and it would know by saying that tomorrow is February 26th, or you use the standard. I personally prefer the standard. The friendly can be a little fickle if you don't know exactly how to put it in there, and if people aren't used to it, and everybody knows how to put in a date, so that's probably the better way to choose your date type. And then again, if you have a default date. Now, if the date of the request is in there, you could put today's date as an option, or you can do a calculated value in here. Okay. Oh, we were going to do the validation in there. Let me go back in.
Enough.
All right, so my start date, I don't want them going in and requesting dates that were prior to today. So if you're familiar with the formulas, you can put a formula in here and ask them whether or not it can be, or whether or not that meets the criteria of the formula, and then what the message is. So it has to be, let's say it has to be greater than today. We're going to use the today option, or you can use the now. Now, if you're not familiar with the formulas that are available within SharePoint, I encourage you to go out. I'm just going to add a new tab here. It's on, but it's going to hide. Go out and search for the SharePoint formulas. Again, this is something I would have put in the chat, but I can't. so common values and lists and formulas. So here's the really good articles on the different types of formulas you can add. And here's the function, simple formulas. You can do the date formulas. Just keep in mind that there's a couple of nuances in SharePoint where we might use if in a Excel function. It might be if in SharePoint. So one of the big ones that I know that stands out. So if we wanted to add and make sure those calculated columns, so I'm going to do SharePoint validation formulas and column validation. I love this guy. Here's some really good ones. So equals renewal date. So you'll see the square brackets are referring to a column name. So anytime you see the square brackets, and the formulas like today are the almost the same, or usually the same as they are in Excel. There's, like I said, very few in there that we may not be able to use, but if you want to make sure that people don't put garbage in their forms, you might want to add those validations in there. All right, so I might say equal and put in, you have to put in the name of the column, which is travel start date. Is greater than or equal to, and put in today, for example. And then that way it would make sure that nobody's putting in a request for a date that already happened in the past. Okay. All right. Other fields, types in here. Calculated columns. This one has travel duration for days. And this is one of the great ways, or reasons to use templates as well, because they can give you some ideas on how to use formulas and see how they created them for you. So this one, the function that they use was dated if, and the travel start date. Notice that it's in square brackets indicating the column name. If you're familiar with Excel, there's always a function name. In parentheses, you have the parameters, which are basically the pieces of the puzzle that you need to complete. So test these out in Excel first and see if they work, and then come in and put them in the formula field and see if they work, because it tends to be easier. Just keeping in mind that your field names in here are not referring to a B6 or B8, like a cell in Excel. You actually have to put in the field name and make sure that's enclosed in square brackets. All right, and this right here, this last parameter is how do you want that to be returned, and it's putting it out as in a day format. So what is the travel duration? It's in days. Notice the data return type for this formula. Right now it's a single line of text. So if I'm wanting to create another calculation on this field, I might want to change that to a number type instead, because that will help me to ensure that I can use that in other ways, because the result of this column can actually be used in another column on my calculation, but I can't calculate text. I can pull information out of text fields, but I can't actually do a mathematical calculation against a text value. You'd have to convert it back to a number beforehand. So it's almost easier to change it here. And then you say how many decimals. So you'll see some options here, and also if it's a percentage or not. So make sure you go in and check. Like I said, the templates are great, but they're not perfect out of the box. You definitely want to go in and make sure that you customize it to whatever your need is. All right. And then the airline is a choice field. So when you select a choice field, that's the option here. And again, the description, the requirement, enforce unique values. And then you give it a list of the values that you want it to display in either a drop-down list or radio buttons or checkboxes. The order that you see them here is the order that they appear. So for me, I'm a little OCD. These need to be alphabetical. I don't like this kind of mishmash of things. But the changing them later can sometimes cause some issues if you're going to multi-select. So make sure that you have those pretty stabilized and know what they're going to be. You can also use a lookup column to another list in your SharePoint site that has those values in it, and record them with that as well. Sometimes that's a little bit more maintainable. And for data integrity, it's definitely more maintainable, because when you tie two tables together, you tie them together what's called the primary key, and that way if you change the order or you change the values, it doesn't mess up the values that are actually recorded in the form. All right, so here I have the choice of drop-downs or radio buttons. Anybody know why they're called radio buttons? A little trivia here. Feel free to unmute.
Because you can select only one.
Right. Do you know where the term radio comes from?
No.
The old classic.
Yeah. So I'm dating myself now. My mother had a 1969 Chevelle, and my spot in the car was on the hump between the two seats on the front of the car. So of course I'm right in front of the radio, and so I was always playing with those buttons, because when you back in the old days when you set your favorites, you had to push in a little slider, and it would move the dial, the little needle over to that whatever your favorites were set. And I was always trying to pull two out and make it be two at once, and you can't, obviously. So that's where the term radio button comes from, if you're curious. Little trivia for the night. All right, allow fill-in choices. So you give them some basic values here, but let's say I want to use some off-brand or, Spirit Air, or obviously they don't have United in here, so I need to add that because that's one for me. United It used to be platinum, but not anymore. All right, so if you want to let them fill in whatever they like, you can choose the yes or no option, and that would give them the opportunity to add something that's not in the list. If you're using this column to create views in your SharePoint lists or to add filters, that type of thing, and those are filters that are commonly used, and it depends on what's in this field, then you would want to allow them to add their own values. All right, notice the column formatting. There's been some formatting done in here. We'll see where that shows up here in just a second. Okay, and then we have the travel duration, we got that. There's another location, the currency. So currency fields are they have to do with money, and again, if you're going to do a calculation based on currency, you always want to ensure that you use the currency data type and don't use a number data type that is formatted as currency, because calculations with that end up with penny rounding errors, and if you're using that for anything financial, it can cause you some issues. So make sure you put in the currency data type. When you choose currency, you can say minimum or maximum. So if they are, I'm not letting them spend $1,000 on a hotel room. Maybe you have some parameters that they have to fall in between for their hotel costs. So I'm going to put in a max of 309. Yeah, that's the New York area. Some places it's a lot less. And then if you want them to include decimals, or if you wanted to round up, you can set that as well. And then what format. So if you're in a different country, you might want them to be able to choose a different currency format, like euros or lira or something else. Click OK. And let's add, let's say this is our starting point. Awesome. We have a wonderful form that's going to create for us, but I have other information that I need to capture from them. So I'm going to create a column here. And maybe the supervisor is, I want to know who that person's supervisor is that is going to approve or has to review this as well. This is the person or group. Now you could create a text field and have them type in that person's name. But when you're working with the person or group fields in a list in a SharePoint site, it looks up to your Active Directory, and this activates some really cool options that are tied to who's logged in, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. So who is the approver? And do you want them to select multiple people, yes or no? Allow selection of people only or people and groups. So if you choose groups, it will let you select some of your SharePoint groups that are tied to your site. If you have certain people that are only allowed to look at or view or approve these items, then you might want to limit it to a group instead of a particular person. Another reason to do this is if somebody leaves that job and somebody else replaces them, and you have this tied to a specific person, that can cause some problems. So if there's great ways of creating SharePoint groups that allow you to dynamically select from that, and I can say only people, or and say a specific person, or I can say people and groups, and let them select a group of people, and then put the members that would be approving that item or viewing that item in that group. All right. How do you want that to be displayed? The default is the name with presence, meaning it's going to have their name in their little presence bubble, but you could have it display their name in their picture. So anytime you have a people and group field, or a people person, we call it the people figure, you can have it displayed in many different ways. So do you want their department, their title, their last name, their username, which is like for Stacy, my username is Sherry.Oswald, or yours might be S. Oswald in your organization. So whatever your username is in your environment would show there instead of your actual name. Okay. And it says, do you want to add to the default view? I can say yes or no. All right. So now that we have our travel requests, we can create views on this library, and some of the views that I would encourage you to do are things like the me view. I'm going to edit this current view. I don't want on the main view that everybody's looking at, the all items, they don't need to see all of the detail. Maybe I just want to give them a few of the fields, because some of these forms can be very extensive. And you don't want people having to scroll right and scroll left and scroll right and scroll left to consume that information. Give it to them in manageable pieces. So maybe on the main screen, I just want them to see the travel overview information. Who's requesting it, where are they going, the starting and ending dates, and how long they're going to be gone. And I can take out all the detail of the trip itself. Where are they staying and how much their airlines are going to be, that kind of thing. And maybe I want approved or not approved. Okay. And then, so I'm going to change that view and see how that fits in this very screen space very easily, where otherwise they'd have to be scrolling back and forth. You can also create new views, and you can do that either from here. You can create a view, or you can use the list settings. If you're like me, I kind of like the list settings options, and create views here. I'm going to create a new view that's called My Trips. And you can start from an existing view, or you can start from a just any basic view, like the standard view, which is like an Excel spreadsheet. As an administrator of a list, I always create a worksheet view that is a datasheet view, so it's automatically in datasheet view, which is kind of nice. A calendar view, which reads off the dates, and you have to tell it which dates you want it to display. And then if you're working on tasks, you may want a Gantt sheet view. Gantt chart view. Right, so I'm just going to use the standard view, and I can pick which fields that I want to show. So I'm going to say My Trips, and the trip name, reason for travel, request or destination. Okay, so I want all of that, but I also want to know what the supervisor, who's in the supervisor field as well. And the requester is me, so I don't really need that one because it's redundant. Obviously, if it's My Trips, they're requested by me. Now, I'm going to create a, you have an option at the top to create a personal view or a public view. And what is the difference here? Now, each person that consumes content on a SharePoint list can have a personal view. I had two women that were working on a list of supplies, and that was their day in, day out job. And one would go in and she would change the view. She'd hide and show and hide and show a bunch of columns, and then the other person would go in and go and change it back to the way she liked it. And what I always think of is the fairies in Sleeping Beauty, where they're like pink, blue, and they're fighting over this list of the views. I'm like, you can create your own views, right? They're like, what? Yeah. You can create your view, Sue, and you can create your view as well. And I showed them how to do that. And they stayed friends, because before that it was kind of questionable. So create your own views. If everybody, let's say there's 200 people on this list, and they create a personal, they all create a view and make them public, then that makes the view list unusable. So if you're going to create a view, like the My Trips view makes sense because we're going to tie it together to who is logged in. Anybody would need that. But if you have a specific way you need to view this list, then I would encourage you to use the personal view. And that way you can consume it the way you need to without affecting anyone else. All right, so our filter here, let's say I'm going to sort it by the date created. So I want to see the most recent ones first. And I'm going to put that in descending order. And then I'm going to filter it by, and a lot of people skip this little description that's right here. There are two really important items in this description that can help you to make a more dynamic view of your list. And they're right here, today or me. And they're in square brackets. So the square brackets are above the enter key and a little bit to the left, and they're not the shift, they're not the squiggly brackets, they're the square ones. And if you use today, then you can use that as a comparison to filter. So I want anything that's greater than today. I don't want to see my old trips that are already done. I only want to see the trips that are coming up. So you might use today as that filter. Or the me view, which lets you filter by who created it, who modified it, or who the requester is, or who the supervisor is. So anywhere where we use that person or group field can be filtered using the me filter. So I'm going to choose the let's say the created by, because that's who's going to create it. Created by is equal to, and in square brackets type in me, and then click OK. All right, so now we're ready to start adding some trips in here, and we can do this from the SharePoint list. We can edit this in the grid view, or you can add a new one. So the new one brings up the form, and notice the little items that right here. It says, what's the name of your group? That's the description that I put in before. What's the reason for your travel? Here's the value. So I'm just going to fill one out here. So let's say the trip name is SharePoint, what do we call it now? Collaboration Conference? Collaboration Conference. I think it's a Collaboration Conference, if I'm right. Attend Microsoft events. Speaking. Now, the requester, maybe I'm submitting this on behalf of someone else. So the requester could be me. And I'm Lynn in this instance. So Lynn is my character today. And what is the destination? It's going to be in Las Vegas. So notice when I type in the location, it gives me different actual locations in here. So I'm going to put in, it's actually, I believe, the MGM. It's usually the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And the dates are in December, but I can't remember exactly what day. So I can use the little date picker. Let's make stuff up at this point. So let's say it's from the 6th to the 8th. It was supposed to be next month, or March. And then, of course, Ignite moved theirs, so they moved it out to December. So I hope I'm still speaking. All right, so those are our dates. What airline do I want to choose now? These are radio buttons. If I wanted to be able to select multiple, then I would need to change these to checkboxes. Or notice it says specify your own value here, and you can put your own. So from here, there's a Southwest is just moved into Colorado Springs, and it's on there. Or Frontier goes direct, even though it's not my favorite airline. I said that outside voice. Okay. Estimated airfare is going to be $200. I'm going to stay at the MGM. And it's probably going to be $250 a night. And notice how it says approved and the supervisor attachments. Now, is that a good idea to have in your actual form? Because I could turn this on right here and say, yes, it's approved. I'm not supposed to be able to approve things. So there are ways by using content that you can hide these columns from the form view if you need to. Or when we go to create the PowerApp, we're going to set that up here. Now, this is in my sales and marketing site. So anybody that would put a trip request in would have to have access to that sales and marketing site. Is that a good idea? Probably not. The security can be a little iffy when you are letting people into a site that is used for other purposes. So even though we gather the content here, doesn't mean that we want them to actually be able to access the site. So I'm going to go into PowerApps instead. So we're going to create an app directly from this list by clicking the drop-down and create an app. Watch how painful this is. Trip, request, and click create. Remember, I'm a little snarky. When I say it's painful, watch this. All right, so the first time that she's been in PowerApp, so it may want to authenticate who you are, where you're at. It's loading her the contents. Okay. Now the good news is it's doing all the hard work for me right now. It may take a minute, but it's doing all the hard work for me. Now keep in mind you have to have a license that gives you the option for PowerApps. So it created the PowerApp here for me. Here is the items that are currently available. Now if you're not familiar with PowerApps, you have multiple screens. And those screens are on the left-hand side. So this is the browse screen, which is the default. The detail screen, which shows the detail of the trip. and then the edit screen. So if somebody, imagine you're on your phone and you're filling this out, you want to see the detail about the trip that you currently entered. So here's the North American Collaboration Conference, and the little arrow here on my phone, I would click that to go see the detail. So that's the detail screen. The edit screen is if I were to go into here and edit this item, then it opens it back up so that I can edit the columns that are in there. If you want to see how that's going to work, you click the little play button up here in the upper right-hand corner, or notice the shortcut. I always love the shortcuts. F5 will let you preview the app. And this is what it would look like on a device, a phone or device. You can create different views of different apps based on the devices that are there, but this one, I'm going to go ahead and click the detail button. Here is the form that it created for me. Notice that not everything is in here, just the basics are here. And anybody know why? Sometimes it depends on the view that you create your app from. So make sure that you create a view that has the details you need in it. Sometimes can streamline things. So I'm going to edit the item. I can go back in here, and you see that there's my estimated error is $200. Maybe I change that to $250. And click the little checkbox to make the changes. So what did that do? I'm just going to refresh back here. And let's edit this item. And my airfare has been changed to $250. So there's a dynamic link between the app and the list. Now this app can be promoted to your organization and put out in basically your app store. So anybody who needs to request a trip can go out and can submit it via the app. Now, obviously this is pretty plain Jane. I'm going to click the X in the upper right-hand corner to close the preview. Always read the pop-ups. Our tendency is to nuke the pop-ups, get out of here, I'm trying to get my work done. Read them. They give you really cool tips. So this one's telling me you can also test your app on the canvas by holding down the Alt key to activate the buttons that it controls. So I didn't have to click the play. If I click OK and I hold the Alt button down and hit the button here, it'll take me there. I'm holding the Alt button again and clicking the edit so I don't necessarily have to go into the preview to look at that. Now this is kind of plain and boring. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah, just say one note is that when you do edit it this way, the person that has login, remember, is that app is using their login for the data connections.
Correct.
You need to be aware of that.
Yes. So they would have to have permission on the list to contribute to the list. Is that why you're mentioning that?
Right. Or if you're going to be publishing it out, if that user would terminate or have different roles down the road, and that data connection doesn't get updated, then the app could no longer work.
So let's clarify that. So to your point, whoever created the app, which in this case is Lynn, when she created it, it added a data connection in the background that allowed the submission to the list. She has permission on that list to add items to the SharePoint list. And if she leaves the organization, her account gets killed. She no longer has access to things. Then this app would no longer work. So there's ways that you can transfer or share ownership, and there are if you are familiar with April Dunham, she's got some really great content out there. Search for her; she's amazing, and she gives you all the tips and tricks on that as well. I only have an hour, so I don't have. I wish I could go into all the ins and outs of this. Okay, but thank you for bringing that up because it's definitely a gotcha if you're trying to keep something that's sustainable and doesn't leave when you leave. All right, if you want to edit, again, this is not really a PowerApps course, because that would be a whole nother hour or more. But the different elements, you have the property panel on the right-hand side. So when it creates it, just like anything with the wizard, it creates it good enough. But you might want to do some tweaking on it. You might want to add some different fields than what are here. This one, I am really big on naming things. So you can see the values that it created. Here's the screen, the browse screen 1. This maybe I want this to be the main screen instead of browse screen 1. I want to change the properties of that. The browse gallery. So here is the collection of the items. And as you select them, you can see they're highlighted here. So this is separator 1, and that is highlighted. If I want that to be a different color, then I can choose a different color and choose something really obvious you can tell. All right. Oops, did I do it? No. Color, border, oh, this one. There. And I made it really skinny. Maybe I want it to be thicker. So we're going to make that 3. All right, so each one of the elements on the page can be customized. And I would encourage you to use names that are a little more intuitive than Browse Gallery 1, Detail Screen 1, because you can add additional screens as well, and sometimes by having those names, when you're adding the really cool coding that you can include in any of your apps, being able to refer to things by a specific name is a whole lot easier than trying to remember was that edit icon 1 or edit icon 2. I don't remember. So give them names that you remember and make it easier.
Hey, Sherry,
there's a good thing up there on SharePoint or PowerApps that has the first 3 codes that you can like put in front for the naming and then name whatever you want.
So their naming convention.
So for like LBL, button, GTN. So pretty much all my stuff that I'm building, I'm using those first 3, and then I name it.
Very good. So that is, I totally agree with that, and I've been doing that since I've been using Access for almost as long as I've been using SharePoint. And the same thing, when you have different elements on the form, you want to make sure that you can tell, and for the data field type, so if I'm in the data field, I'm just going to go to the edit screen. And this field, I always put the data type as part of the naming convention. So if it's a text field, it's a TXT. If it is a date, it's a DAT on the name of the object, so that I know exactly what kind of data is being stored in there. Because depending on what type of data you have determines on what you can do with it. So good points. I love the name convention. Thank you.
Hey, Sherry, I got a real quick one. I'm sorry, someone knocked at my door, and so I think I heard this mentioned, but I just wanted to see where that went. So when you were talking about when you create your own PowerApp, how about I think I heard someone say about how you address it if that person leaves the organization. How are you? Did you talk about the owner? What you do with that?
We did talk about the owner. And it's actually better to have a co-owner on everything, right? Just in case you win the lottery and run away.
Yeah.
Because if you're like me, I was always the adventurous one in the organization that was creating stuff, whether the organization liked it or not. I'm like, I'm going to innovate, whether they're on board, and then after you build it, they do come. They do arrive and like realize, oh, that's really cool. But trying to get their permission to do things sometimes was difficult. Did I just encourage y'all to do stuff that you maybe go rogue on?
Yeah. But I have the best practice for that if you want to hear it.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
So every organization, so you can do it differently. So you can have essentially what they call a service count for each one of the Power Platform areas: Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, or you can have one for all. Like we have some clients that just do like Power Platform as an example, as the main service account. And then as anybody is creating them, use that as your secondary owner. So then regardless, the corporation, your organization has ownership of any Power App, Flow, or Power BI that is created within your organization if someone leaves.
Sorry, I thought that was going to open a panel. Right here in the upper right-hand corner, do you see the little button that says share with other users? that actually opened a new screen now, and it will let me share it with other people. So that, again, to Stacy's point, this might be a service account. It might be a peer or somebody else in your department. And then make sure that ownership is transferred if for some reason that person leaves.
Yeah, if you do not do that and someone leaves, to transfer it over, you have this whole export import key thing you have to do, but you have to wait. You have to wait until every single process is finished before you do it, meaning you have to take it offline for those processes to finish before you can do it, and it becomes a really big mess. So always think about that ahead of time and not after the fact.
That's when we call Ryan.
And Ryan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because Sherry doesn't like to do those things. I'm the end user productivity person. I don't like to do the coding stuff. It's not my favorite thing.
All right. So each one of your fields can be customized. You can change the color, the background.
Again, each of the elements you want to change the icon. You can see them here. If you're more of the function or coding type person, I know enough about these to be dangerous, and I can go in and tweak them once they're created, but it's not something that I type off the top of my head. Because I'm, like I said, I don't code. My joke is I'm an ABC consultant. Anything but code, I don't like it. Because in my experience in SharePoint, when somebody's come in and custom coded a whole bunch of stuff and then they leave, that's the mess I usually get. So I try to do everything I can out of the box as much as possible. But there are times when we have custom things that need to be done, and that's okay. Just not my favorite. So that's why we have Ryan. Who's amazing, by the way. If you haven't met Ryan, he's amazing.
Okay.
So after you can set these up. Let's say later you realize, oh shoot, I forgot a field. I'm going to go back in and add to my list. So I'm going to go to the list settings. And let's say I want to put in here seat preference or rental car or something. And add a choice of what is your seat preference. And we want aisle, window, or I'm going to put in here my version MVOH, my version of hell, which would be the middle seat in the back of the plane. Not fun. All right, so here's that where we want them to select more than one. You can put in the checkboxes. And what the default choice is. If you whenever you add a choice field, it puts the first item you typed in as the default. So if you want to make them choose, then make sure you clear that default value. Otherwise, people can get lazy and not fill it out. All right, so what do we do now? We already have our form. We need to now add that item into our request form. Or maybe we don't want to show or hide. We want to add some of these items to the list. You can add new screens, but you have to be in the edit form view or in the detail screen view, and then add those fields in. So your data fields are here. So here's the travel request form. And display the list. Shows up over here. Did they change it, Stace? Did I miss it? It used to put your data fields in so you can drag them on. Am I missing it?
Oh, you're talking about one of the new changes that just came out, aren't you?
Okay.
I think it's in the plus.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's in the plus now. Yeah, they changed where all that stuff sits.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to edit.
Hey, Microsoft is nothing but if it's not keeping you on your toes.
It's true, right? Okay, so I'm going to add my tree view and go into the edit screen. And you may have to change the size of the canvas, or it may adjust for you if you need to. Insert, and then here's the text label, vertical, you can add icons. So things are icons like the check mark, and this might be an icon. And then let's say I'm going to do an text input
No.
Put that here. Okay, now they're really messing with me.
Too hard for Mom. I'm in a
Meeting.
meeting.
Adjust.
I'm in a meeting.
All right, I'm going to take out this travel duration because it should do the calculation by the dates. Wow, it's locked it. I can't even. Oh, there we go. Boy, they're trying to make it user-proof so people won't screw it up, aren't they?
Yes, that's the point, yes. Yoda agreed, if you didn't hear him.
Hi, Yoda. All right. It's not letting me put the field. Usually, honestly, you just drag it in there and it goes, and then you map it to the field.
That one got placed into the other card. I can take it out.
All right, I want to add space here. And these are all locked. Unlock.
Deal with your brother.
That used to be really easy, y'all. That one's unlocked. All right. They move it down. No. Let's put a label. See if I can drag it. It's going into that other field. I don't know why.
Now when I've done PowerApps and edited fields, I usually have to go and choose that entire field block and then choose move up and down. I usually can't drag them.
Yeah, and I'm trying, and they're like, are you talking about the index over here? Position?
Yeah,
see, those are locked too.
I have to go into the tree view.
All right, it's obviously being cranky.
So what you're doing should be working. You should be able to move it down.
Thank you. So I'm not smoking crack.
You're not. You should be able to move it down with what you're doing.
All right. So I'm trying to resize the canvas too, and that's not working there.
Hi. Somebody add it is to go to Tree View and on the right, Edit Fields, and then you should be able to add it that way. Once you click on your form, and on the right is Edit Fields, underneath Data Source.
Okay. Yeah, so I apologize, you guys. This has all changed since the last time I was in here.
Yeah, but you're supposed to be able to do it the way you're doing it too. But this is always like if that doesn't work, FYI. just saying, because you can do it the other way.
Yeah, I learn new things all the time, but hopefully it's not while I'm presenting. It's not a real happy thing. Okay, so I need to refresh the data because it's not refreshed. It's not pulling in my new field, so I'm going to click the refresh data.
There. You have to add.
You have to click on add field.
Because I'm looking for that.
Up at the top.
That new column I just created.
Up at the top, Sherry. There you go.
Yep.
All right, so here's all of the data. There's when you create a location, there's all the street addresses and everything. So that was the seat preference, right? And it'd be nice there. There. Now we can move that. Do I want to? What type of control do I want it to be? This is more familiar. Thank you. Oh shoot. Get it me. All right. So we're going to add the seat. You should be able to drag and drop it right onto this. This is what I loved about it because it worked just like Access.
It's already there.
Yeah.
Scroll down. It's there.
Yeah, put it at the end. Then you should be able to drag it up if you want to change the spot or drag on the other thing.
Okay, it's locked. I'm not going to mess with it. It's on there. That's what I meant.
So in the fields thing, you should be able to drag it up.
Oh, here.
There.
That's easier. Oh, I actually do. I like that better.
There you go.
Yeah, because that was kind of a pain. Yes.
Can you expand back out the
fields?
The fields again.
Okay.
So the edit field. The one thing I want to point out, because you've been adding your columns in the back end, what I call kind of the classic back end instead of on the modern front end.
Correct.
So when you did your seat preference, you see that lovely ugly underscore X20? name your names with all one word, then change it later. That creates a havoc in PowerApps when you have to build apps.
That's a really good point. I like that because it doesn't like special characters, right? Just like in a web address, it puts a percentage 20 when people put spaces in the names of things. So that's a really good. I didn't know that. Because it was in Classic that it added those.
So if I'm going to do a collect and patch, I actually have to name it the title that the field title is, and so I'd have to type out seat underscore x2000 and then do my two little dots and then tie it all together. If I was doing a collect and patch, this is more, one that's pre-built, but a lot of stuff that sometimes you build with the Canvas app. You're doing some collect and patching, and that causes issues.
That's good.
Just more like, it should be this. Oh no, there's a space. So put in underscore x20.
You're like, thank you so much, Sherry, for creating it like that. I appreciate it. Yeah,
But if you say bad words. If you create your columns on the front end on the modern with spaces, Microsoft built it in where it will put the field name all together. But it's the back end Classic still acts like 2013.
Interesting. Because I am not a big fan of these side panels. And because I don't find that they're easy to read personally. That's as much as my, so let's say we have put in rental car, right? Preferred rental company. Choice would be, I don't know, Hertz, dollar, and enterprise. And add values manually, so this is the equivalent of that back end, the default value if you need one. And here are the other settings, so make sure you always expand those. The reason I like to work in the Classic view because they're already there, and what I notice when people create them here, they don't expand that and see all the other options.
Right.
Yeah. So there. Click save.
Another one I wrote down earlier mentioned, you're pinned. Where we've kind of utilized a pin is when you actually need those running comments. So like for an intake form that for that process they need to back and forth. So you need to see like the exact running comments. That's where we kind of turned on the pinned in the SharePoint list to keep those running comments.
And that's helpful if you need to keep the history, right?
Yep.
Right, so I don't see seat preference. I don't see the rental car.
You got click on
refresh here.
I did there, and then there. Okay. So let's look at the field name. See, it took the space out even though I typed it in there. So that's really good to know. This is why I love user groups. We all get to learn from each other. I just dealt with it because that's the way it's always been done. I love that. Thank you so much. All right. So once you're done, after you've tested it, you run it, you test it, make sure everything's working correctly, make it pretty, add your icons, all of that fun stuff. You need to publish that form so everybody else can see it and be able to use it and share it with other people. All right. So I usually do that from my home screen because I have other people test it for me. If I go home. PowerApps. Oh my goodness. Why are you being cranky? And PowerApps. And here are your items. So I do want to point out that you can create them from here. If you want to connect to a SharePoint list, you can do it from here as well. So you can either click the PowerApps button from SharePoint and it will publish it to PowerApps, or you can click the SharePoint button and connect to an existing SharePoint list. Either way works really well. So here's the trip request, and there we go. So this is ready to go. So this is how it would display. Now, if you have a SharePoint site, you may want to go back to that page, so the main page, and edit your page, and add a new web part. This is one option.
and add your Power App to the page. So you'd have to know what the link is to that app. Go back to your app and find the link for it. Is it still in the ... or is it going to make me cranky? Mm-hmm. This is the link here. And paste it in. You should get a preview. Turn a border on or off. And then we publish your SharePoint page. So it's built to be like phone size if you wanted to, but I think it fits really nicely in a sidebar on a SharePoint Modern page. All right. Any questions, comments, stuff to add? I love the feedback. Thank you guys all so much. These are what user groups are for, right? Awesome. How are you using those? Have anybody ever done this before where they've connected it to a SharePoint list?
Oh yeah. Most of mine is pretty much Canvas, and it's standalone, so not really from customized from the SharePoint list itself. So it's standalone and then adding the data connectors. But a lot of the stuff that we're doing for intake is a little bit more in depth, but still trying to keep them as simple solutions as possible. But
complicated confuses people. We try and keep them.
A really nice one to do as a basic one is employee appreciation, like a nominee for Employee of the Month. And then that way you can also make it a mobile app, and so people can do it right from their phone. They don't have to take out their computer to put in a nomination.
I love that. And then I do another session about using Microsoft Forms for that as well. And then you can collect content from anybody and into a SharePoint form or a Microsoft form, and then it can post into a SharePoint list. You map it. There's some tricks to that too. But absolutely, and I love that you say that. My previous life was HR, and that was my biggest area of contention, was that people shouldn't know how they're doing every 6 or 9 months or whatever whenever they get their review. They should know daily if they're doing well. They need to know, right? Or not well, unfortunately. But giving people kudos, especially right now, everybody needs all the morale boost they can get.
Right. And then if you even want to integrate it with Teams, I'm sure there's probably a way you can do it with the Power Platform to post in Teams praise for that person too.
Yeah, you can actually share it and make it an app, and then you can add it as an app in your Teams group.
The only thing you might want to make sure is somebody's moderating that, because not just everybody can post whatever they want. Because one of the reasons I got out of HR is because when the thought, who raises these people, pops into your head on a daily basis, probably not the best job for you.
If it's tied to a list, the results will show up on that SharePoint site where somebody is monitoring and doing that.
That's great. Now, from the team side of things, remember we created that as a Microsoft list from Microsoft Lists. You could create it from Microsoft Lists here or add it to the tab. And if here's the list tab, and if I have an existing list in my group, you'd have to know what the list address is. So we'll go back here, find the list settings, and this is going to be the link. Everything up into the view, which is the all items, the slash, and the ASPX, whatever that is, that's your view, and I missed the H. Go back to usually it just pops up with a, be able to select it, so let's see if this works. It recognizes that you created it. Maybe it's when I created it from Teams it puts it there. So then the people that are managing that list of travel requests can now manage it from Teams in a tab. So you've got the people requesting the trip from an app. That you have SharePoint that's capturing that and potentially doing workflows behind the scenes to automate some of the processes for that, sending out notifications to the supervisor. They need to go in and approve it, that type of thing. Didn't like it. Okay.
Okay. And then whoever's managing those from the team side of things, you put the team, the list on the app here as well. Wonder if I go into the actual list and just do the URL. It might pick it up. Let's see. Instead of the list ID.
See what happens.
But
all right, that's all I got.
Would love to have your questions or feedback if you have any, or if you have information to add. These are we all learn in the field every single day, which is they're user groups, but they're kind of support groups too. These are our I wish somebody would have told me XYZ before I did this. So anybody have any of those gotchas they want to share?
In your opinion, for Microsoft Lists, is this just our traditional old list, but just now with templates for them?
Yeah,
and some pretty formats.
I will veto that slightly.
Okay.
Because the new list actually... sorry, Khaleesi's snoring if you hear that. It's not.
Thanks for the clarification, Stacey. We were wondering how hungry you really were.
Oh my God, that was loud as soon as I started talking. On the back end, they're setting those lists up for the additions very easily into PowerApps and Power BI. So they take a little bit of that additional work you have to do to groom them for PowerApps, and then eventually Power BI. So when you go through the list, it's actually helping you in that type of a way, especially if you're importing Excel lists or starting from one of the templates, because in the templates, they already have somewhat flows associated to some of those templates and stuff already, and you essentially just have to add to them. So it is actually helping you build like stepping stones to build to those additional processes.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Like those
underscore 00x0020 are not there.
You got it.
Yeah.
It makes it happier for the developers. That's good.
Yeah,
I don't know why it's not displaying on here. It should have come up one of those two ways, either by the list ID or by the URL, but it's not recognizing it for some reason.
It does
when you add it from Teams. So if you start from Teams and use the list here, maybe it's happier that way. I don't know. Right. So good question. That's why I said, it's been around for 20 years, and people are like, Microsoft this, and I'm like, it's been there for 20 years. Thank you. And same thing with all the people that are, I love OneDrive, and I love Teams and their files and it's been there for 20 years. And SharePoint.
Yeah, but also say I hate SharePoint.
Yes.
So.
Well, I have a phrase for that, but I've been told I can't use it anymore because people don't have it. Because we're recording, or I'd share it.
Are you in the Colorado area?
I am.
I'm in Colorado Springs.
Okay. So I saw your name earlier. I'm like, hey, this has to be it. So I know who you are now, because last May with the 72-hour. You and I were the ones in the after party.
Oh, yes.
This is me, yes.
So
you, me, and the three guys.
Poor Ryan and Joel and Jeff, they're all sitting around at the end of that marathon. They've got their feet sitting in the pool, and they're talking, but you can't hear them because their mic was not turned on the laptop that they happened to take outside, and the glare of the screen, the glare of the sun was on the screen, so they couldn't see it. So I'm the one that texted him and said, "We can't hear you, Joe." We were actually just talking about that the other day. And he's like, yeah, Sherry's the one that bailed us out on that one. We're like, we can't hear you. It's not. Oh, you see, nothing else going on. But yeah, they're doing another one. I said, you're glutton for punishment, aren't you? But I think they've figured out how they're not going to stay up for 72 hours straight themselves. They're going to try and
I think
That was
delegate.
definitely a marathon for him. I mean, it was cool talking to other guys that night. But yeah, I was like, this has to be Sherry. Then you mentioned like it is Sherry that we got to talk and meet back in May.
That's awesome. Hopefully we get to meet in person.
Yeah, I know. I'll be there if everything tends for December. I will be there in December in Vegas. So
Nice. Awesome.
All right.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and end the recording, Stace, if you want to, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, I'm stopping.